Ari Lewis Show.
All right, welcome everyone to today's episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on IsraelSportsAndNewsRadio.com. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to email the show throughout the program, you can do so at arilewisShow@hotmail.com. Or if you'd like to email the station itself, you can do so at IsraelSportsAndNewsRadio@gmail.com. NBA playoffs is upon us, in the thick of things. Very interesting matchups and some interesting stories. I want to discuss all that. The founder of OMG Poetry and frequent contributor to the Jerusalem Post, Joe Robbins. Joe, how you doing out there?
I'm doing well, thanks, Ari. Great to be back on the show. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful, and I'm sure you're in a good mood. The Warriors are on a hot start. They've had a great season all year long. A lot of people thought that in the playoffs, Western Conference team that doesn't play a lot of defense might get them a bit in trouble, but they look strong right now. So give your assessment of the Warriors up to this point.
Yeah, I think they've been great. You know, definite respect and credit is due for the Pelicans. Anthony Davis is a superstar, whether it's 1 year, 2 years away. It's pretty much universally agreed now that he will pass LeBron James to be the greatest basketball player alive. They have a good young core, and they really tested the Warriors. But I think that speaks just how strong this Warriors squad is. The fact that they were able to sweep the Pelican squad and do it in a historic fashion with the Game 3 comeback. Steph Curry, obviously a superstar, should be the MVP this year, and he showed it in the series. 3 30-point games. In Game 3, he became the first player since Chris Mullin to have 35, 5, and 5 in a game for the Warriors when he was near a triple-double. And in Game 4, he did the same thing with 39 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds. So, I mean, you're seeing guys who, like you mentioned, were incredible all season, had a historic season with a historic record at 67 wins and 15 losses, step up their game in the playoffs, and really showing that when they care, they can beat anybody. And it's a team that does care, but got lackadaisical a little bit against New Orleans. But then, like we saw, came back from 20 points down in the fourth quarter, only the third time in NBA history that had ever been done in the playoffs, and really showed that they can beat anybody, anywhere. So I think it will be a great playoffs continuing. It already has been, but the Warriors off to a great start with the first sweep of the playoffs.
And tell us, Stephen Curry, you mentioned that you believe he should win the MVP. I know there's a couple other candidates, so give your argument for Curry. A lot of times you don't see a guard win the MVP unless his name is Michael Jordan. Usually it's a big man like a Shaquille O'Neal or Tim Duncan or Kevin Garnett, etc. There are exceptions, obviously, but tell us why you think Stephen Curry deserves to win the MVP this year.
I think it comes down to a few things. The most obvious argument, which in my opinion isn't enough by itself, but is a great starting point, is best player on the best team. He is the engine that makes the team go. He's the superstar. The Warriors, no question, are stacked. They have 2 all-stars in David Lee and Andre Iguodala coming off of the bench. But Steph Curry is the best player on the best team in limited minutes compared to the other MVP finalists. He had the best per minute points and assists. And I think the intangible, which is sort of ironic to call an intangible at this point because you count on it every single game, is he has a highlight play that makes you stop and rewind, that makes a SportsCenter top 10 every single game. And he's doing things that have never been done before. There was so much talk during the season, and especially now during the postseason, when people are actually watching Warriors games on the East Coast, because they always start at 10:30 in the morning and end at 1:30. I mean 10:30 at night and end at 1:30 in the morning. But for the playoffs and on the weekends, people get to watch the Warriors, and they're singing and talking about how he's a once-in-a-generation point guard. You had Magic Johnson, you had Steve Nash, you've got Steph Curry. And so while James Harden had a great season, Russell Westbrook had one of the best second halves of an NBA season of all time, and of course LeBron was LeBron. I think Curry proved it on the court with his offense, his defense, his leadership, his efficiency from the field, really every category that you look at. And he did it in the fewest minutes played. And it's not a situation where, oh, yeah, he did it, but in limited time. He played and led the team in every single game. They were just beating people up so badly that he didn't have to play most fourth quarters. At one point towards the end of the season, there was a stat that he was third in the league in steals per game and 41st in minutes per game. And that really, I think, is a great stat that kind of epitomizes the season he had, everything he did, averaging 24 points and 8 assists a game almost. If he was playing minutes like Harden or Westbrook, he easily could have averaged 30 and 9. And then on top of that, breaking his own three-pointers made in a season record for the third consecutive year, being part of, we keep talking about, I keep mentioning how they were the best team in the NBA, but they were the first team to lead the NBA in offensive and defensive efficiency since 1981, and they were the first to lead in field goal percentage since the offense and defense since the 95-96 Chicago Bulls 72-win championship team, and only the eighth team in NBA history to have a point differential in double digits, and 6 of the other 7 won the title. So again, it's one thing to be the best player on the best team, like we've seen with LeBron for many years of his career, like we saw when Nash won the MVP, but he was also the best player on an all-time great team. So again, I think if there were other years, Harden could have run away with it, even Westbrook with the time he missed, but you look at what they did for their squads versus what Curry did for the Warriors, I think he gets the nod in what should be a close vote for those reasons.
All right. Joe, of course, has his Golden State bias, but pretty good argument for Stephen Curry. We'll find out in a couple of weeks who will win the MVP of the NBA. Now, Warriors will have some time off with the sweep in the first round. They get the winner of Portland-Memphis. Memphis is up 3-1, and that game is going to come pretty shortly in a couple hours. We're taping now. By the time people listen to this, that the series could be over. So your prediction might be a little weird because the game could be over by the time everyone hears it. But Memphis seems to be rolling. They were my dark horse team anyway. I think in the second round they'll give the Warriors a run for the money. Do you see Portland somehow stretching this into a Game 6 or Game 7 series?
I don't. I think Portland will put up a fight tonight, but I agree with you. Memphis is clicking at the right time. They were great all season. They dropped a little at the end of the season just because of the crazy tiebreaker and one of the craziest last game finishes we've seen in the NBA in years with the Spurs, Memphis, and the Rockets and the Clippers all fighting for the 2, 3, 4, and 6 seeds, the way it played out. So Memphis easily could have been the 2 seed. And really, I think they would have been the 2 seed and closer to the 1 seed if they hadn't had the injuries. Now, that's not an excuse because every team has injuries. We know that. But the important thing to note is they're finally getting healthy. So I think they beat Portland. They'll be good. The biggest question is, Mike Conley, their star point guard who missed a lot of time during the season with those injuries I alluded to, he suffered a facial fracture in the last game. They're going to wait till the swelling goes down to see. There's no reason for him to play tonight, even if he is healthy, because you save him in case you need him for the next time and give him more rest. But I think even without him, Bino Udrih has been great filling in for Conley. Memphis should win. And then the big question mark is Conley's health for the next series against the Warriors. But, yeah, I see Memphis wrapping it up tonight, winning in 5 games and facing a rested Golden State squad.
Yeah, I can't wait for that second-round matchup because Memphis more defensive-oriented versus the high-power, high-scoring machine of Golden State. So that'll be a fun series to watch. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show on IsraelSportsNewsRadio.com. Thank you for joining us. Our guest this afternoon is Joe Robbins. Joe, let's talk about a very interesting series, San Antonio and Los Angeles. San Antonio gets the win on the road in Game 5. Game 6 will be back in San Antonio. So this is a matchup of two great teams. The Spurs are the defending champs. Duncan seems to be on his last legs, but we've been saying that for probably, 6 or 7 years. Tell us what you think is going to happen in Game 6 in San Antonio.
I think the Spurs will win it. I think the Clippers' only chance in this series, and this is no disrespect to the Clippers, putting away all of my bias as a Warriors fan, the Clippers are a great team, but the Spurs are the Spurs. The Clippers earned that 3 seed. They've been great all season. Chris Paul might be the second best point guard in the NBA. Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, their team is stacked top to bottom, and Doc Rivers is a championship coach. But no one since Popovich started coaching has been a better coach with a better team than Greg Popovich and the Spurs. So when the Clippers won Game 1 at home and said to the Spurs, we're going to beat you up, we're going to be over physical, you're too old to handle this, the Clippers had a chance. But in my opinion, Game 2 became the most important game of the entire playoffs up to that point, because the winner of Game 2 was going to go on and win that series, which isn't often the case in a lot of series. But with it going back to San Antonio, I said, if the Clippers don't punch the Spurs in the mouth now, if they don't knock them down to an 0-2 deficit, the Spurs are going to come back. Spurs won Game 2, then they won Game 3 at home. It was huge for the Clippers to get Game 4 to tie it up. But then losing to the Spurs, I just don't see the Clippers coming back from behind against this Spurs team, even with home court advantage. Even if it goes 7 games, I don't see the Spurs being outplayed by the Clippers. So I think the Spurs will advance. They'll play the Rockets. It'll be a nice all-Texas second round for that side of the bracket. But, yeah, just too much Greg Popovich. And Tim Duncan sure didn't look like he was close to retiring last game. That was vintage Duncan. That was one of the best games he's had in a career filled with so many incredible playoff games. That was another great one. He had blocks, steals, a huge double-double, and outplayed Griffin and Jordan. And I expect to see more of the same. And even scarier for the Clippers, Tony Parker didn't have a very good game, and the Spurs still won. And you know he'll bounce back from that. So I have the Spurs winning to take the series and move on to face the Rockets, who closed it out against the Mavericks last night.
Yeah, Rockets win the series 4-1 against Dallas in the first round. Now, we were talking about James Harden. What I found interesting with the Rockets, you have Dwight Howard scoring under 16 points a game for the first time since his second year in the league. So has he gotten comfortable with his role where he lets it be Harden's team? Howard's there to get rebounds. He's over 10 rebounds a game, be a presence in the middle, do block shots, and talk about, assuming whoever, if they play the Spurs or somehow they play the Clippers, they're somewhat forgotten because people are talking about the Warriors and they're talking about Memphis as a dark horse team. But the Rockets have been solid, number 2 seed. And talk about what do you expect them to do in the playoffs with the mix of Howard and Harden. And they have some great role players, Ariza. They have Jason Terry. They got a little of everything. So talk about Houston.
Yeah, last night after the Rockets defeated them, Rick Carlisle, coach of the Mavericks, said the Rockets are contenders, and I agree with him. I think for all the reasons you mentioned, the depth of the bench, Kevin McHale is an infinitely better coach than he was executive. He coaches the way he used to play, which was a Hall of Fame level. So I'm not anointing him a Hall of Fame coach yet, but I think they've got a great coach. They have 2 superstars in Harden and Howard, and I think they've got the setup with their front court where last night we saw during the clinching game, Harden was really bothered by the excellent defense from Al-Farouq Aminu on the Mavericks. Aminu is bigger than Harden, longer than him. He was frustrating him. And Terrence Jones, one of those reserve forwards, one of those contributors for the Rockets, he came up to Harden after Harden missed the shot. Jones tapped it out for the offensive rebound, and then there was either a foul or a timeout, and Jones went right up to Harden and he said, "Keep shooting, I've got you." And I think that's the role that Howard has taken on also. They're totally fine giving up their shot opportunities, their baby hooks and different post moves when they don't need to be looking for them, to have Harden do his thing because they know how lethal he is and how devastating he can be from the perimeter with that jump shot, and they know they'll get their points. Howard had 18 points and 19 rebounds last night, and most of those points he got a good amount, although on a bad shooting percentage, he got a good amount from the free throw line, but the majority of those points were putbacks and doing the dirty work, cleaning up the trash. And so since he's embraced that role, I think that inside-outside game of Harden and Howard with the reserves that you mentioned really gives them a chance to compete with anybody. So I think it will be a good second-round series. Whoever they play, I think it'll be a better second-round series against the Spurs because I think they're the 2 better teams. But if the Clippers come back and win it, it will be awesome seeing the front court, Dwight Howard going against DeAndre Jordan with Blake Griffin and the other bigs for both teams in the mix, and Chris Paul on Harden, depending on how they do it. So really, one of the coaches at the beginning of the playoffs, one of the Western Conference coaches said, any team that makes it to the second round of the playoffs is a contender, any of the 4 teams. And I wholeheartedly agree. Any team from the West can win it, and whoever makes it to the finals out of the West will definitely give whoever comes out of the East a lot to handle.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show on IsraelSportsNewsRadio.com. Thank you for joining us. Of course, the email is arilewishow@hotmail.com. And if you want to email the station, that is Israel Sports and News Radio at gmail.com. Our guest is Joe Robbins discussing the NBA playoffs. Joe, let's move over to the Eastern Conference, and I'm not shocked that Atlanta is in a dogfight. Atlanta historically has not done well in the playoffs, even though they're the number 1 seed. I was not scared of them at all. The series is tied at 2, Game 5 in a couple of hours in Atlanta. What do you expect to happen? Can Brooklyn pull off the first-round upset and win the series?
They definitely can, but I don't think they will. I think this Atlanta team is too well coached, they've spent too much of the season in control of their own destiny. They definitely weren't as good in the second half as they were in the first half, but they were also so good and so far ahead of everyone else. They're able to be lackadaisical. They were able to be a little complacent at times. You never want to see that, but it's a reality of professional sports. So I think, Brooke Lopez has been playing great. Brooklyn is much more experienced than this Atlanta team in terms of the playoffs. But again, I think Atlanta is just too well coached. They're so unselfish that they will find the way to get whoever needs to have the ball on that night the ball. They'll get their points and they'll beat Brooklyn. I think it will remain a dogfight, like you said, but I think that Atlanta will advance out of the first round. And I also think a big key that hasn't really been discussed much since it happened, but a big key for their struggles, which is why I don't think they will make the Eastern Conference Finals. They don't have Thabo Sefolosha. He was injured in a scuffle with the New York Police Department after Chris Copeland, another NBA player, was stabbed outside of a club, and he broke his leg, tore ligaments in his ankle, and is out for the playoffs. And when you look at Sefolosha's numbers, he averaged, 5 points and 3 rebounds in 23 minutes a game. Well, those definitely aren't overwhelming stats by any measure, but he was their best perimeter defender, and he's a lockdown defender. That's what he's known for. Even when he was drafted, he was a first rounder. He's from Switzerland. He was a lotto pick who came over from Europe. The one knock against him was his shooting. Well, he hasn't needed it because he's such a good defender, and he's actually had very good success against LeBron James. So that's a huge blow to Atlanta. Obviously, it's hard to say what he would be doing this series, but not having him, no question, hurts them. And I think for that reason, while they will beat the Nets, I don't think they advance further than that.
And part of the reason for that is they're going to be taking on the Washington Wizards, who cruised. They swept Toronto. They look great. Washington, even though they're a 5 seed, very deep. You have Hilario, Brandon Beal, John Wall, one of the better point guards in the league, and Paul Pierce. Nice veteran leadership. I know the guy's almost 40, but had 14 points a couple of days ago. So talk about the Wizards, because I agree with you. I don't think Atlanta will go on to the conference finals. That would mean Washington will and have a chance to play for the NBA Finals. So talk about the Washington Wizards.
The Wizards are looking great right now. In addition to sweeping a good Raptors team who imploded, as much credit as the Wizards deserve, Toronto definitely disappointed in the playoffs. But they were a really good team, and the Wizards made it look like they were, maybe a 2 seed playing a 7 seed. They handled them with no problem. Another very well coached team. Another team really seems to be the theme in these playoffs. Another team with a star point guard. You've got Bradley Beal, who is a young up-and-coming shooting guard, 4th overall pick out of Florida a couple years ago. Bradley Beal and John Wall combined for a great backcourt. Nene inside, consistently been the top tier of centers for the majority of his career. And then Paul Pierce with his leadership, with his making fun of the Raptors and riling his guys up. He's doing exactly what they need him to do. And I agree with you. I think the Raptors will be playing in the NBA Finals. They're going to have a tough matchup against
wait, you mean the Wizards will go to the Eastern Conference Finals?
Excuse me. Yeah, sorry, the Wizards. The Wizards will beat Atlanta and face either the Bulls or the Cavs by my predictions, and they really could put up a fight. I don't think they're a better team than the Cavs or Bulls, but I also did not expect them to sweep the Raptors. So they've really shown they're ready to play, and they're going to bring it, and they have the perfect amount of swag without being overconfident. They talk at the right times. They get in their opponent's heads at the right times without showing their hand, without overstepping their bounds and committing the silly mistakes, the mental errors that prevent you from being as good as you're able to say you are. And I think that's one thing that's really impressive with how young some members of their team are, having Nene, Paul Pierce, and some of the other older guys who have been there to say, hey, we've got all the talent in the world. We're here. We're the real deal. It doesn't matter how young some of our players are. A superstar is a superstar, and we're going to meet you wherever we have to meet you to achieve our goals. And that's definitely what they did to Toronto, and I think they'll, they believe they can beat anybody. We'll see whether they can or not, but they've definitely earned that second round spot with the convincing sweep of the Raptors.
So you weren't bothered at all by Paul Pierce's tweet and some of the trash talk he did. I mean, he had a very good series. He averaged 15 points a game in the sweep. But the whole, whatever he was doing, the trash talking even after the series was over, that didn't bother you. You thought that was just him being a leader.
I personally would not have done it and never would have gone about it that way. But I think he knows the guys he has on his team, and he's reacting to in that way. With the exception of some comments about the Celtics and about the Nets after he left each stop, Paul Pierce has never really acted this way publicly, definitely not to this degree with the tweets and the memes and all of that. I mean, he's making fun of the Raptors fans. He went after Drake. So this is something that we've never seen before out of him. And as you mentioned, his age, it's not like he just came into the league, right? It's not like some switch got flipped and all of a sudden he's confident one day. He's won a championship. He's a future Hall of Famer. So I think he knows that his team needs him to be that vocal leader on the court, and it's extending off the court again. I think he went too far. It's definitely not how I would have done things, but we've seen that the young guys on his team are thriving off of it, and John Wall's spoken about it, and he said Pierce is our leader, and they're following his lead, and it definitely pumps them up. So I was a little surprised that the NBA didn't have more to say about it. Maybe they just wanted to avoid it altogether. But I think as far as the Wizards are concerned, as long as it's helping the team and not hurting it, which it has been so far, that's all that matters. Now, having said that, the interesting thing will be to see how he reacts and handles himself in the next round. Was he doing this because it's a Raptors team that no one in the NBA really follows to the same extent? All of those stereotypes about the Raptors that we hear about them being out of sight, out of mind because they're in Canada, a lot of different things. Would he try this same stuff against the Cavs or the Bulls? We know he has a history, not the most friendly relationship with LeBron on the court, so maybe he would. Or would he say, all right, this is a real team. These are guys who've been there before. It's going to hurt us, not help us. So that's what I'm most interested to see about it, is whether that was just against the Raptors or whether he's embracing that bad guy role and he's going to take it for as long as the Wizards are in the playoffs.
Okay, now Joe, you were mentioning that you expect the Bulls to get by the Bucks. I agree with that. I actually think the Bucks did very well to get to the 6th seed. I think they overachieved. But if I were a Bulls fan, I would be shocked that the series is going as deep as it is. The Bulls are up 3-2. Game 6 is in Milwaukee. It could even extend to a Game 7. So is that the Bulls having a bit of a letdown in the first round, or are the Bucks even overachieving in the postseason?
I think it's a combination of the two. Jason Kidd has proven that he wasn't a fluke with the Nets getting them to the playoffs last year. He took the worst team in the NBA, turned them into a playoff team. I do think that it was a little bit of a stretch, and they overachieved a little bit getting to the 6th seed, and the fact that they were in the East definitely helped with that. But they can play ball. They've got some great young players who are inspired by their great young coach. And I think that's really what's led them to win the 2 games and extend the series. I also think that it is the Bulls still finding their stride. Derrick Rose has been great, but he's really still trying to fit back in. They're trying to find that chemistry that they lost when he went out the first time. So I think the Bulls are, let's say, shaking off the cobwebs now when they know it doesn't matter as much. They win tonight, they'll be ready for the next round, and hopefully for their sake, they'll be back on track in terms of that. So I think it's a combination. I think it is the Bucks having the Jason Kidd effect and their young players being a year older and them getting a feeling and a taste. You know, when the Cavaliers swept, a lot of people said the Celtics had nothing to hang their heads about, and I completely agree. The Celtics are a great young team who's going to be very good, and I think that it's the same with Milwaukee. They had pretty much zero chance of winning this series, but they're putting up a great fight, and that's what matters, and they'll have that for next year. So having said that, I think their players are looking at that and saying, hey, let's get as much experience as we can. No one in the world expects us to win, so we'll take it one game at a time and do what we need to get there. I do think that their run will end, but they've put up a good fight, and they've definitely made Chicago think about its team going forward when it'll be facing a much better team than they are.
Yeah, a bit surprising the series has gone this deep. I know some people thought Chicago was going to sweep Milwaukee, and that's not the case. Last question we have for you, Joe. Again, we both assume the Bulls are going to win the series. They would take on the Cavs, who are fresh, will have a lot of rest because they have that sweep. And this was a series that a lot of people, myself included, thought would be an Eastern Conference final, Bulls versus the Cavs. I thought it would be one of those two teams in the NBA Finals. Everyone else, it's a crapshoot. Here they're playing in the semifinals. So if you can give us a bit of an analysis, we know Kevin Love. We're not sure exactly about his status, but he might not be able to go for them. And the Bulls are very deep. You have Joakim Noah, who won the Defensive Player of the Year last year. Analyze this series for us because it's going to be a great one. It might be the best series of all the semifinals.
I agree, and I think it will probably be even better because Kevin Love is out. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to come back for the Eastern Conference Finals or the Finals if they make it that far, like you said, with his torn labrum in his shoulder and all the other all the other related problems he's having. But I think because Kevin Love is out, that gives the Bulls more of a chance, especially if they can get on track, which should make it an even better series, because I definitely think that that the two top teams in the East are the Bulls and the Cavs, despite what Atlanta did during the season. I think especially for playoff basketball, it's the Bulls and the Cavs. The Cavs and the Bulls in that order. So I think it should be a great series. I think the Cavs will win it. LeBron will do what he needs to do. They've had enough time to prepare. It will have been close to a week, at least 3 days of practices since the Kevin Love injury. I think they will use that time to refocus, to come up with a new game plan. We know that David Blatt is skilled from his time in Israel and with the Russian national team, but all his time in EuroLeague. We know one of his biggest talents is doing a lot with nothing or not so much. He never had the most talented team, but he was always uber successful. Now he's sort of in that same position to some extent without Kevin Love. How do they regroup? How do they game plan? How do they do it? Clearly, having LeBron James, the best player in the world, on your team helps a lot with that. And I think they will rely on LeBron more. And I think Kyrie Irving also. You know, he was the first player, I believe, the first LeBron teammate in Cleveland, including all his years before, obviously, to have over 25 points in 2 games in a playoff series playing next to LeBron. We're going to see that Kyrie Irving again, and we're going to see, if we need to, the 40-point LeBron James. I think that's how they'll compensate, and because of that, as well as Chicago has as good of a team, as Chicago has, I think the Cavaliers get the slight edge, and they'll represent the East in the finals.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Cavs are the better team. You talk about MVP again. I understand Curry will probably win it, but you look, the Heat did not make the postseason after making the finals 4 years with LeBron. The Cavs, a seller last season, this season, most likely on their way to the NBA Finals. Joe, we appreciate the time. Everyone can find Joe Robbins on Facebook under OMG Poetry, and you can also find him on his personal Facebook page, Joseph D. Robbins. Joe, we appreciate the time. Enjoy the NBA action. Thanks for the breakdown. And you know what? I know the fight's coming up. This is a basketball segment, but we know you're a big boxing guy. Your prediction a few months ago by program, Mayweather by decision, you're still sticking with that?
You know what? I'm actually going to change it. I'm going to go Mayweather by knockout. I'm sticking with Mayweather. But, yeah, bold decision, a prediction I never thought I would have made. But as the fight's gone closer, Mayweather has really embraced it. And I think he's going to be leaning in and more aggressive than we've seen him. And he'll do enough to end the fight early. So okay. I still think it'll be late round, but I'm sticking with Mayweather, but changing from Mayweather going the distance to Mayweather with the knockout.
All right, good stuff. So we'll have that prediction on file. We'll see what happens. Joe, we appreciate the time. Be well. Enjoy all the good sports out there.
You too. Thanks so much, Ari. Always a pleasure.
Likewise. Be well.